And away we go. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Wherever you happen to be in the world today, welcome one and all to Coffee Talk. It's time once again for Coffee Talk Live, where we will be having some discussion about what is going on in the world today. We'll take a look at some clips from the news and have a little bit of dialogue with those of you who are able to join us for the live portion. And if you are listening anywhere else and you would like to join the live portion, you can find us Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, most of the time, on YouTube, on Coffee Talk and Prepper University, and that is at Coffee Talk Live and at Prepper University. Please join us there. Please subscribe if you have not. You can find me on X at Coffee Talk Chat, although I can no longer cast to X because I don't have a premium account. And you can find me on fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. Being joined today by one feline. You see Daniel back there sleeping in the chair behind me, keeping me company. And we are down to 18 again. We had two adoptions that happened just last week. So we went from 20 to 18. Working on it. I'll go ahead. Again, I do always try to read through as many of the comments as is plausible for the benefit of those of you who are listening and not able to see, so that you can keep up with the ongoing conversation. And I'll say hello to some of the people that have joined us thus far. See, Helter is here today, as well as Dragon, Fluke Man. Brian is here. And Legends have chosen to say hello, as well as Raccoon. There's a few other people floating around, but they don't have to chime in if they don't want to. It's okay. Special thanks to Victoria, who made a donation directly to the PayPal link for the cats. Much appreciated. I'll take all the help I can get. And I see Sven is here. Glad you could make it today as we get ready to jump off into the realm of the ridiculous, which is the world that we are trapped in. And we'll take a look at what is going on, and we're going to go all the way to Iran. Because why not? Because that's been top news because of what's been going on ever since the pager incident. And this is a RBC Ukraine article. Iranian Guard bans all means of communication after explosions in Lebanon. Okay. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has ordered its members to cease using any communication devices following a series of pager explosions and radio detonations in Lebanon. A large-scale operation is currently underway to inspect devices and more. And this comes directly from Reuters. The IRGC is conducting a comprehensive inspection of all devices, not just communications tools. Most of these devices are homemade or have been imported from China or Russia, so you know they're reliable. The report highlights Iran's concern over the risk of Israeli agents infiltrating its ranks, prompting a review of personnel, particularly among mid and high-ranking IRGC members. So expect people to be unnecessarily tortured who probably know nothing. This includes scrutiny of their bank accounts, both in Iran and abroad, as well as the travel history and that of their families, the security official said. Yeah. Another unnamed Iranian official noted that Iran's primary concern is safeguarding its nuclear and missile facilities, especially those located underground. Security measures at these sites were heightened last year after Tehran accused Israel of attempting to sabotage its missile program. There has never, ever been such tight security and extreme measures in place as there are now, the source added, suggesting that security was further intensified after the explosions in Lebanon. I would think so. Additionally, Iranian military personnel are utilizing a range of encrypted communications methods, including radios for secure communication. Yeah, you already tried that. It didn't work out. Many devices are being developed domestically to reduce reliance on foreign imports. However, in the past, Iran has imported communication devices from countries such as China and Russia and even Japan. Okay, so a ban on all communications devices. So what are they going to do? Like get cups and strings or pigeons, smoke signals? Well, with all the fires going, I don't think smoke signals are going to work that well. What are you going to do? Fluke Man says, I'm sure the new non-citizens would be more than happy to take your furry friends off you. No, I'm not in Ohio, though. I'm not in Ohio. Dragon says, update from Hez, a government officially adopts the carrier pigeon. Yeah, as its primary means of communications due to their impeccable supply chain records. You mean they didn't eat them all yet? I imagine if anybody saw a pigeon flying overhead in Iran, they'd probably bring it down with a sling and eat it. A lot of hungry people out there. But yeah, they banned all measures of communications, which is ridiculous. So the whole pager thing apparently is a very successful program because now they can't even talk to each other. They're scared. And they're also going to interrogate mid-range officials as if they had something to do with it. Whatever happened outside of Iran. It happened outside of Iran. But they're going to interrogate and torture people and do whatever they do over there to get them to confess to things that they may or may not have done and most likely didn't. Because that's how things are handled in the Middle East, ladies and gentlemen. I just think it's hilarious. They're just going to sit there and ban everything. Good luck with that. And it goes on to tell us about the explosions. We already know all of this. We already know what's been happening. We know about the pagers and the radios and the bombing raids and everything else that's been going on. I heard they hit like, what, 300 targets over the weekend? Rocket sites and all sorts of things. It's a mess. It's a mess. And of course, there are political leaders in the United States whining about it, like AOC. And once again, AOC, why don't you go represent your constituents in your boroughs in New York instead of pissing and moaning about everything else in the world? When do you actually do your job? I wonder about these people. When the hell do you actually do your job? Do you know what your job is? Do you know what your job is? That's a celebrity politician. Celebrity politician. All they want is that negative attention. They follow that negative attention model and put themselves into the media as much as possible for attention, but they don't actually ever get anything done. Cruising is here. They say AOC should go over there and do something about it. Yeah, go ahead. If anything, we need to stay the hell out of it. They've been fighting for 5,000 years. They're going to keep fighting. Okay? You're not going to get them to sign a piece of paper and everything will be peachy. That doesn't work. And it's a very westernized ideal. It makes me think of my days in the JJA, and we had them sign in everything. They sign 100 damn piece of papers, the clients. You think they cared about any of that? It's just another piece of paper you're going to force me to sign. Here's a signature, here's a signature, here's a signature. It doesn't mean a damn thing. It means nothing. Well, I promise I'm going to do this, and I swear I'm going to do that, and whatever. Let me just sign this and move on. People don't care about that stuff here. You think they care about it in the Middle East? It's incredible. It's incredible how stupid they are. But while we're talking about AOC and we're on the subject of New York, the shadiness just keeps running deeper and deeper over there. It's incredible. Anybody associated with Mayor Eric Adams should leave the country. LA Times article, New York's interim police commissioner says federal authorities have seized materials from his homes. This is the guy that replaced the commissioner who just quit because of the FBI investigations. Okay? And they're on him now. Federal authorities searched the homes of New York City's newly named interim police commissioner and seized materials unrelated to his police work. What does that mean? The unexplained and unexpected search comes as the administration of Mayor Eric Adams reels from other federal law enforcement investigations. Thomas Donlin, who became the interim commissioner just 1 week ago after the resignation of his predecessor, issued a statement late on Saturday through the police department. Quote, on Friday, September 20th, federal authorities executed search warrants at my residences. They took materials that came into my possession approximately 20 years ago and are unrelated to my work with the New York City Police Department, the statement says. This is not a department matter, and the department will not be commenting, he added. The statement did not address whether the investigation was what the investigation was about, which federal authorities were involved, or what materials had been seized. Fabian Levy, the city's deputy mayor for communications, says, as we have repeatedly said, we expect all team members to fully comply with any law enforcement inquiry. It's not like you have a choice. It's not like you have a choice. So let me catch up some comments here. Chillin has joined us. Chillin Davis here, as well as Gary Edwards. Brian suggests I don't have a long name to sign. Just put your initials. Write duress in cursive. Write the word duress. Cruising says, Western ideal that is formed in a society where there is enough water and food for everyone. That doesn't fly when there is not enough of those for everyone. There is, but they pinch it off. They oppress their own people, or as Sun Tzu said, some leaders will burn down their own kingdom to rule over the ashes. So just a week ago, the previous police commissioner, Edward Caban, resigned after federal authorities seized his electronic devices as part of an investigation that also involved his brother, a former police officer. You know what I always find interesting about these, though? In New York with these politicians, and this is, we've been reading this off and on for a few months because Mayor Eric Adams seems to be surrounded by a lot of corrupt people that are under investigation. It sure looks that way. Whenever there's a search and seizure, it's homes, plural. How many houses does he own in New York? You know how expensive that is? How many houses can the New York police commissioner afford to own and maintain in New York on a police commissioner's salary? I wonder how that's managed. You know what I mean? Because that can't be cheap. Says federal agents have also seized phones in recent weeks from the head of the city's public schools. I hadn't heard that one. So the head of the city's public schools, a top deputy mayor, I heard that, Adams' top public safety advisor, and others. Okay, and that I've read those, but I did not read that the person in charge of the public schools in New York City had also been searched. Investigators searched homes connected to Adams' top campaign fundraiser and Democrats' Asian Affairs Director. Now, I remember those stories. Last autumn, federal agents also seized Adams' phone as he left an event, and it was a charity event, if I remember correctly. Charges have not been brought in connection with any of these searches, and it was unclear whether there was any connection to the search involving Donlin, who wasn't part of the Adams administration until a few days ago. If he's a big enough politician in New York, there's probably corruption there somewhere. Everybody seems to be under investigation. And Gary Edwards says, Tammany Hall. There you go. Invoking Tammany Hall. That's going back a ways. Fluke Man says, doesn't Middle East chop thieves' hands off? Some places do things like that. Not all of them. And he says if BLM are so pro-Palestine, Biden should buy them plane tickets to ME as a vacation, to the Middle East ME. Yeah, they won't go. You think they're going to leave? They can cry about it all they want, but they're not going anywhere. They can cry all they want about how they're treated unfairly and how they're oppressed and racism and whatever you want. They're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. I just think it's really interesting how everybody around Adams, around the New York City government, keeps finding themselves under such scrutiny from federal authorities. Helter here says, I like the part where the mayor says he feels his accomplishments are being overshadowed. I'm seriously like, what accomplishments? And they all say that. What accomplishments? Mayor Eric Adams, the mayor of Chicago, all of these people, Nancy Pelosi. You might recall also Kamala Harris suggesting that part of the reason why Biden was becoming so unpopular because he wasn't being bragged about enough about his accomplishments. What accomplishments? What has he done? 50 years in office. What has he done? It's like Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson retired. Oh, his accomplishments. What accomplishments? What has Jesse Jackson done besides race baiting? Besides fleecing people in court? What has he done? What has Bernie Sanders done? What's he accomplished? All he's ever done is politics. What has Kamala Harris done? 34 years in office. Flukeman says they'll go if you give them some spending cash. Not all, but some. You think? But just tell them it's a trip. Pull an okey doke on them. You know how like you ditch somebody? Oh yeah, we're going to go on a trip, and you take them out in the woods and you run away. You take them to some part of town, they don't know where they are, and jump on the bus. Maybe you can okey doke them like that. But we're not done with New York. Not by a long shot. ABC News article. Federal authorities subpoena New York City Mayor's Director of Asylum Seekers Operations. Here's another one bites the dust. As New York City Mayor Eric Adams faces a swarm of investigations into his top ranks, federal prosecutors are now seeking information from the director of New York City's Asylum Seekers Office. Federal prosecutors scrutinizing a web of top officials in New York City Mayor Eric Adams' administration subpoenaed the director of the city's Office of Asylum Seeker Operations to testify before grand jury. Molly Schaefer, who coordinates the city's efforts to get housing and social services for newly arrived migrants, received the subpoena at her Brooklyn home Friday, according to a person familiar with the matter. The person spoke to the Associated Press on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the subpoena. The authorities did not seize Schaefer's electronic devices, as they have done to several other of Adams' aides in recent weeks, but served her a subpoena requesting her presence in front of a federal grand jury in Manhattan. It was not immediately clear when the testimony would take place or how it could fit within the multiple ongoing federal law enforcement investigations swirling around Adams, a first-term Democrat and former police captain. Schaefer directed questions to the deputy mayor for communications, Fabian Levy, who decided to comment on the nature of the investigation. Quote, we expect all team members to fully comply with any ongoing inquiry, Levy wrote in a text message. They all say that. And again, what choice do they have? Oh, I refuse to cooperate. All right, contempt of court. Sit in jail until you do. Molly Schaefer is an integral part of our team and works hard every day to deliver for New Yorkers. Excuse me, no, she doesn't. I'm going to read that quote again from Levy. Molly Schaefer is an integral part of our team, and what does she do? Works hard every day to deliver for New Yorkers. No, that is not true. She is the director of the Asylum Seeker Operations Office. She works every day to deliver for illegal immigrants, not for native New Yorkers. Okay? That's just not true. I'm sorry. Schaefer has not been accused of any wrongdoing. Federal prosecutors often use subpoenas to get testimony of records from people with information relevant to an investigation, not necessarily because they believe the person has committed a crime. But if they think she's guilty of something, they sure will bury her. Oh, Brian says Kamala has done permanent damage to people's ears with cackling. I guess so. And Helter says it's all a distraction. Look behind the curtain. And Fluke Man says, like me, spent decades in school, but got nothing to show for it. I absolutely hate school. I skipped school more than I can remember. And I totally get that because, once I discovered ditching in junior high school, I hated going to school. I saw it as a complete waste. I discovered that in junior high. This is a waste of time. I'm not learning anything. I'm not doing anything useful. Plus, it's a hostile environment. And I'm sure it's much worse now. Dragon says illegal immigration is big business. We'll never truly know where the money went. And Kimberly is here, says, how can they determine the census of the USA when there's been millions more not counted, yet they're going to vote? That's the reason they are here. I don't think they can ever get an accurate census anyways. And then Stacy is here, says, happy to be here. Happy Monday. Glad you could make it, Stacy. Hope your day is going well as we look at more corruption in New York. More corruption in New York. It just can't get away with it. You can't get away from it. They might not get away with it. They've been getting away with something for a long time. Again, a lot of these aides who are having their homes searched, it's homes, multiple, 2, 3, 4 properties. And I'm like, most people can't do one house. How do these people, working in local city government, afford and maintain multiple properties in one of the most expensive cities in the country to live in? And Cruising chiming in. And of course, Cruising works within the public school system. Says school district here is literally giving diplomas to illiterate students. The equity that has been fully embraced by the school system for the feels good feelings has undermined the institution. The institution's been getting undermined really. I mean, it was always a flawed system. But since the Department of Education, which I believe was developed by or under Jimmy Carter, correct? And of course, the more the government sticks its hands in something, the more it dirties everything up. And this is just the pinnacle of that failure, what we're coming to now. It's coming to a head where a lot of these school districts have just reached a point where they're like, yeah, all right, we already know these kids are brainless. They're not learning anything useful. They're not succeeding in anything. We'll just give them their piece of paper that's not worth the ink that it's printed with, and go on. Cruising says flawed system. I think it's gotten really bad since 1988. Yeah, well, since the onset of the Department of Education, which would be in the 70s, and I believe that was under Carter. I could be wrong on that. I'm sure somebody will look that up. But it was already a flawed system, but it was better once upon a time. It made more sense, and it had stronger emphasis on reading, including comprehension, writing, including manual writing, and writing legibly so that people could comprehend your thought process, as well as basic arithmetic. And if you had a student who just wasn't cut out for it, they had other types of classes. They had shop, they had woodworking, they had home economics, which were geared towards professions at that time. It was geared towards professions. So they had a place to put these people because not everybody's cut out for book learning, okay? Or as Dubois said, you need ditch diggers as well as doctors. Stacy says, sometimes I look up too much stuff and it scares me to death what goes on in the world. Does it ever make you feel afraid? Sorry, random and off topic. No, It is toxic. Like even sitting here, I've mentioned that before. Sitting here reading this every day is toxic for me. Being exposed to not just the levels of corruption that you see going on everywhere, obviously, but just how ignorant and foolish people are. And you could sit there and say, they almost deserve what they get for being so dumb. But whatever happens to them is going to affect everybody else too. So you're not going to get out of it unscathed unless you're just going to be a hermit and go live in a cave 100 miles in the woods somewhere. But since we had already been on the subject of Kamala Harris, as she was brought up here, we may as well knock this out. USA Today article. Kamala Harris's plan to add 3 million housing units is an ambitious 50% jump. All right, and I have some points to make about this. A standout campaign issue for the 24 election has been housing affordability. Amid a housing market with rising rents and home buying out of reach for many Americans, both Democratic presidential nominee Harris and Republican Trump have vowed to make housing more affordable should they take the White House. Part of Harris's solution is to build 3 million more homes over 4 years, as she repeatedly brought up on the campaign trail. Harris has really focused on saying the federal government needs to find ways with local, state, and federal government agencies to encourage additional housing production, said Yana Freemark, a researcher with the Urban Institute. There is some evidence that increasing availability of homes is associated with somewhat lower prices. I don't think it's the only solution to increasing affordability, but it is an important element of it. Between new construction delays during the pandemic and people holding onto their homes due to high interest rates, the lack of supply helped contribute to rising prices in homes. Quote, it's not only that there aren't enough homes, there aren't enough affordable homes in the places where people want to live, said economist Kyle Moore, with EPA action pointing out that many new luxury units that developers build are unaffordable for many renters. Okay. I have some issues with this. Okay. First of all, one of the main reasons there's a housing shortage is because we have too many people. When you throw the gates open, and in the last almost 4 years under the Biden administration, allow a flood of 11 or 12 million extra people, you're going to run out of places to put them. Supply and demand, simple as that. So people who want to rent or sell property know that there are way more people looking for it than there should be. Second of all, one of the main reasons why property values keep going up is A, taxes are increasing on those properties. And what do you want them to do? Go bankrupt and then have the city confiscate the property? I'm sure the local governments would love that. And then two is that when you end up with squatters or other issues, they tend to destroy those properties. They wreck properties. They're completely disrespectful to the homes or the apartments that they're living in. They ruin them. And that costs a fortune to fix. Okay? And then you want to build houses all over the place. How? By taxing people more and dumping that money into other federal programs to, quote, entice builders to make more homes. Georgia's already having a problem with that. Their local governments are trying to stop all the construction that's going on out here. We had local politicians running on that ticket recently because they held some local elections a couple of months back. Apparently, they've been throwing out tax breaks to level wooded areas around here, because I've been wondering, where the hell are all these houses coming from? This whole community's going up and nobody's in them. There's more properties than there are people. Nobody's in them. And they're still building them. And they throw that shit up quick. Builder grade garbage. Builder grade garbage. Whole neighborhoods going up in a few weeks. Not kidding. Okay. Once the groundwork is done and they got the sewage and everything in. You know, my wife works for the water department currently. They can't keep up. They keep warning these communities that you're not going to have enough pressure. The water pressure is falling off. It's got to be expanded. It's got to be expanded. The state doesn't have the money for it, but they have money for tax breaks to build more houses. And people were running on this ticket. Hey, you vote for me, I'll try to stop that. No more, I can't stop we can't stop the construction that's already underway, but we can prevent putting out more contracts. That's what happens when government gets involved. Gary says they shut down the RV and mobile home parks, or they got bought out and they raised the rents. All her solution is going to do is cause more problems. It's going to cause more problems. And people still won't have money, because how's it going to get paid for? Where are those tax breaks going to come from? It's got to be compensated for somewhere. You're going to pay for it. You're going to pay for it out of your pocket. Fluke Man says, as a father with his toddler son playing on the phone, and an old guy said, today's kids are smart because he can't use the phone like a little kid, but the news and documentaries are saying it's the opposite. You're not smart because you can fiddle with a phone. And that's a mistake. Button pushers. It's like the example I've given with math about how nowadays these kids are in these math classes, these advanced math classes, algebra and trigonometry and geometry and all this other stuff, and they can't do the work. They can operate the calculator, and the calculator does the work. When I was a kid, you couldn't use a calculator. You get suspended if you were caught with a calculator. You had to write all of it out and attach it with your answers so that the teacher could go through and make sure you didn't cheat. You had to know how to do it if you were going to take those classes. Now they make these kids take the classes, and then they can't really do it. It's the calculator. Then if you give them money to count, they can't do it. They can't count change. Oh, but he got an A in algebra. No, the calculator got an A in algebra. Cruising says if the homelessness was about having structures to shelter people in, it would be solved. But it isn't. No, it's not. It's not. And Gary says Springfield, Ohio has 20,000 Haitian immigrants who bought up all the available housing and gets first crack at new jobs. Plus the EBT cards have over 10,000 on them, and they drive $100,000 cars. Unbelievable. But they're oppressed. Speaking of which, I had a couple of stories from this weekend. I've got a couple of interesting stories from this weekend. And I'm not going to tell them all today. I'll tell one today. Maybe I'll tell one tomorrow. Okay. Something that my wife and I like to do sometimes is go yard sailing. Okay. Go yard sailing, or go garage sale, yard sale, boot sale, whatever you call it. Driving around looking for yard sales, all right, in some of the suburbs surrounding the Atlanta area. And we drive into this affluent subdivision. It's got, the signs up, yard sale. I don't remember the name of the subdivision, okay? You know how they have a name in front of it, the Lannister properties or whatever, Lakeside Homes. I don't know. I can't remember the name of it, okay? And it's a very affluent Atlanta suburb, all right? It's a well-to-do community. And okay, let's take a look. It might be some interesting stuff at this yard sale. Big, fancy houses, upper hundreds of thousands, $1 million homes and up. Okay, 700,000, 800,000, 900,000, $1 million homes. And we get to the yard sale, and we get out and we walk towards the house, and then my wife is like, "Ooh, I don't know if I want to go here." She starts getting upset because of the yard signage. They have like banners plugged into their grass along the side of their home, right? Black Lives Matter, women's lives matter, Black Power with the fist, you know, the old outline of the fist. And my favorite, it looked like a flag actually. Again, another one with the fist, and it says free-ish, ISH, free apostrophe ISH, free-ish since 1865. And she's like, ugh, because she doesn't like that kind of stuff. She's like, oh, I don't know if I want to go to this yard sale. Because, I mean, basically, those signs, you know, I'm, you know, wheels are turning. I think about a lot of this kind of stuff. I people watch all the time, and I think about the things that people do, including these signs, right? So I'm looking at this, and the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, you're basically telling me I'm not welcome. My wife is black. Most of you are aware of that. You're telling me I'm not welcome. I can imagine a reversal if they came to my house for a yard sale and I had iron flags and banners in front of the house with iron crosses and swastikas and stuff. You'd probably be pretty offended. But I'm expected to just suck it up. You know? Okay, whatever. Secondly, the second thing that comes to mind for me is the HOAs, because again, this is an affluent community. It's got to be an HOA. I mean, you've got the pool house and everything up front, and the party house and whatever they've got up there. There's got to be an HOA. They usually don't like that kind of stuff, but I bet you they're not going to say anything to this family because the family will accuse the HOA of being racist. Predominantly black neighborhood, as is most of the areas around Atlanta. Okay. And obviously, this was a black family. It was 3 women and a kid. All right. A much older woman, could have been in her 70s, and then 2 younger ones. Third thing that comes to mind. Okay. Third thing that comes to mind is the flag. Thinking about the flag in front of that house. House looked like it was worth $1 million. It must have been a 10,000 square foot house, big property, lot of yard. This whole neighborhood, these houses are like I said, 7, 8, 900 up, 1,000, $1 million and up. Very, very valuable looking properties. And you've got a flag that says free-ish since 1865. Who's oppressing you? Who's holding you back? I don't have $1 million house. Anyone else? Do you honestly feel oppressed? It occurs to me how many people who are obviously doing real well in life want to sit there and bitch like they're being held back by somebody. The man's out to get everybody. Let me tell you right now. I've been on the receiving end. It's done to everybody, but it's only recognized with certain groups. It makes me think of the postal worker. I've mentioned this a couple of times because I read that story last year in Chicago because they were experimenting with the idea of reparations, but they couldn't find any former slave descendants in that area. They couldn't find any. So they reverted to looking for people who might have been oppressed. Okay. And I read the article about the postal worker, and I remember that really well because of how much he pissed me off. Because he said that he was subjected to discrimination because when he was a kid in school, the teacher would call on him when he didn't have his hand raised to humiliate him. And I'm like, you son of a bitch. The teachers did that to everybody. That happened to me all through elementary and junior high school. Okay? And especially in junior high school, most of my teachers were black. Were they discriminating against me? I have no idea. Probably not, because that was just a method that was used during those time periods to try to call that student out, humiliate them on purpose in the hopes that next time they'll do better. Didn't work, and I don't necessarily condone that method, but looking back, I understand what they were trying to do. But, for him, it's oppression. When it happened to me, suck it. Is that the idea? This is your idea of discrimination. The teacher pointed at you when you didn't have your hand raised. And you're a retired postal worker. You had a good middle-class job you worked at. I think it said like 30-something years. Put your kids through college, bought a home. Who's oppressing you? Who's holding you back? It's incredible. People are just so ignorant. It's frightening. It's frightening. I'm almost embarrassed to be human. Brian says they remember in one video you said how these kids think they're smart because they work apps and search things on Google. Yeah. People do think that makes them smart. And it's not. And then whatever you look up, I love this too with all these things where it's like, oh, well, let me take my phone and I'll scan a leaf and it'll tell me what kind of tree this is or whatever. Or Google translate this. You know, back in the old days, you had to look that language up. Back in the old days, you had to do research and find out what kind of tree it was. The difference is if you researched it to find it out, you're not going to forget. If you put your phone up and took a picture of a leaf just so that you could, oh, that's that kind of tree. 5 minutes from now, you won't remember. Cruising says they make the kids take the classes because it offsets the bad scores for the flunky kids. It's just about money for the school system that the kids and workers below administration don't get. Gary says blaxploitation 8-track tapes are highly collectible. Shaft, Superfly. Shaft doesn't count because Shaft was actually a mainstream film. And there were 3 of them, 3 Shaft films. Shaft in Africa, or Shaft Goes to Africa, and Shaft's Big Score was the 3rd film. And then there was a failed TV spinoff, a TV show. I think I'm not sure it lasted a whole season. But yeah, that was actually a mainstream film. It wasn't blaxploitation. Sadly enough, one of the biggest producers of blaxploitation films during the 70s was Sidney Poitier, which is kind of surprising because, I mean, he's an old school Oscar winner who starred in brilliant films. And then he goes from Lilies of the Field to The Big Payoff or whatever stupid blaxploitation films with Jimmy Walker, terrible B films that belong on riff tracks. Cruising says the idea that a postal worker used to be able to afford the American dream is making my stomach churn in jealousy. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. That was a decent middle class job, and you're crying about it. Just like these people living in essentially a mansion in a suburb outside of Atlanta have a flag in their yard with a black power fist saying free-ish since 1865. So you're not free. How'd you afford that house? How did you afford the cars in the yard? How can you afford I probably couldn't afford the HOA fees in that neighborhood. And you're complaining. You're complaining. Yeah. But while we're on the subject, and I got a couple other stories from this weekend because it was a busy weekend. While we're on the subject of discrimination, I got a Tim Waltz story for you that's pretty interesting. But yeah, we were out and about a lot this weekend. It was our anniversary yesterday. My wife and I, 12 years anniversary. And so we were out. And so there was a couple of other things that happened that were pretty interesting, but I'll save the next story for tomorrow because we had something really interesting happen yesterday too. But anyways, good old Tim Waltz, Tampa Free Press. Waltz subjected teachers and veterans to racially segregated programs as Minnesota governor. And it says Democratic Vice Presidential nominee Tim Waltz's Department of Education and Department of Veterans Affairs held programs segregated by race and sexuality during his tenure as Minnesota governor. Doesn't surprise me. As more is revealed about this guy, he is very, very textbook progressive. So this doesn't surprise me at all. Under Waltz, Minnesota's Department of Veteran Affairs between 2022 and 2023 advertised a series of training sessions to racial minority veterans on how to address homelessness among those who had served in the armed forces, specifically focusing on veterans who identify as BIPOC or LG alphabet garbage and or a woman, according to materials first reported to the Washington Free Beacon. Waltz's Department of Education, meanwhile, held restorative justice training in 2022, with one session explicitly barring white people from attending. All of that is illegal, by the way. Technically, it's illegal. Good luck enforcing it. Straight white males could technically attend the training held by Waltz's Department of Veterans Affairs, but only if they were willing to serve as a stakeholder or ally to a non-white LGB veteran. How the hell does that work? The department paid the training attendees $50 an hour to show up. Waltz's Department of Education, meanwhile, created a, quote, people of color affinity community that was, quote, reserved for people who personally identify as Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color. The Free Beacon has reported white people were told that they may attend other circle trainings. Can't go to that one. Waltz is no stranger to incorporating racial grievances into his governance, signing a multi-billion-dollar educational spending bill in 2023 that, among other things, introduced a requirement that school districts develop an ethic studies curriculum. Under the requirement, first graders must be able to identify examples of ethnicity, equality, liberation, and systems of power, and use those examples to construct meanings for those terms. Elementary students, first graders, it says. And you wonder why they can't read. High school students, meanwhile, are required to develop an analysis of racial capitalism and anti-Blackness while being critical of dominant European beauty standards. You mean like weave and fake eyelashes? Oh, wow. Flute Man says receiving free money can ruin your mindset. You're more likely to have pride and respect the value of money if you work for it, save and invest it. Your money, you're more likely to spend or waste free money. I agree. Gary says when the Waltz come tumbling down. There you go. And Cruising says half the first graders I've met lately can't even wipe their own asses reliably. Well, you know, I'm a big kid now. They make pull-ups for kids that are damn near up to 100 pounds at this point. When are they potty trained anymore? When the hell? I mean, when I was a kid, parents had their kids potty trained by the time they could walk. If they could walk, they could sit on that potty chair. Get on that quick. And Jericho says liberal brainwashing in the works. That's terrifying to me. Then you cloud these kids' minds with all this gobbledygook, subjects and concepts that they don't need to be exposed to. I'm always an advocate for the 3 R's, and that's what they used to call, it was an acronym, even though one of them doesn't start with R, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, there's an R in there. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. Can you read well? Can you comprehend what you're reading? Writing. Can you write legibly? Can you spell correctly? And can you relay your thoughts so that they can be understood? Arithmetic. Can you do the basics that you need to get through life? Can you count money? Can you do basic addition and subtraction, multiplication and division? Do you know weights and measures? Can you do simple fractions? Fractions are very important in baking, for example. That's what you need to know. If you can do all that, if you're a really avid reader, anything else you need to know, you can figure out. You can figure it out on your own. All of this stuff, first graders, yeah, we're doomed. We are doomed. They don't understand those concepts. Shit, they don't understand them in high school. High schoolers don't understand this stuff. They think they do. Did we forget when we were kids? I bring this up sometimes. I know I've brought it up. I'm sure we all remember how dumb we were when we were kids. If you look back at who you were when you were 8 years old, 10 years old, 12, 14, 16, you don't know that person. It's like, God, how could I have thought like that? How could I have believed that? How could my mind have been there? Because you mature and you learn and you grow. Some people don't. And this kind of stuff is going to keep those kids in the mentality of adolescence. They're going to be 30, 40 years old with the mindset of an 8, 10-year-old. This is horrible. It says, under this system, a healthy 25-year-old African American would have been prioritized over a 55-year-old white person with hypertension or a 64-year-old who doesn't have BIPOC status. Okay. They're talking here about, I skipped ahead, Waltz's Department of Health used race to determine who would receive potentially life-saving treatments during C virus pandemic in 2021. The department adopted a framework which it later revised following backlash that gave Black people privileged access to monoclonal antibodies, a promising treatment for the virus. So again, a healthy 25-year-old African American would have been prioritized over a 55-year-old white person with hypertension or a 65-year-old who didn't have BIPOC status. In other words, someone who might have needed treatment couldn't get it because they didn't meet the color code requirement. That's what that's suggesting. That's what that's suggesting. And Flukeman says there's an old movie called Mary Poppins that's no longer suitable for all ages, while Jurassic Park is still a PG. If adults don't see anything wrong with this, they'll never understand math. Yeah. The only thing wrong with Mary Poppins is Dick Van Dyke's accent. And to this day, they call it, if you're an actor and you have a crappy British accent, they call it Van Dyking because his accent was awful. I'm like, you couldn't have found a British guy who could sing and dance, or at least an American actor who could do a decent British accent, because his Cockney accent was terrible in that film. He's a fantastic dancer. He was a fantastic dancer. Anybody who's ever watched Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, or if you're not familiar with it, look up Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the bamboo pole, or bamboo cane or bamboo pole dance, shot in one take from multiple camera angles. That dance sequence is insane. Absolutely insane. That was some skill. Cruising says, to be fair, with the way the vaccines have worked out, you were probably better off not getting treated. No kidding. Gary says there was a film they showed in high school in the 70s called Future Shock that warned about the coming freakiness. Raccoon says, how come in almost 2025 race is still an issue when it comes to things like that? We should all be equal by now. You would think so, but we are not, because we've taken steps backwards. And that's why it makes me sick when I hear Harris and her campaign. Donald Trump wants to bring us backwards. But we're not going backwards. We're going forward. Going forward to what? We have been going backwards ever since the Obama administration when it comes to race. that was going away. You weren't seeing it so much anymore. You weren't really hearing about it so much anymore. People weren't caring about it so much anymore. Obama gets into office, he whines about race. Oh, I guess America wasn't ready for a black man, a black president, excuse me. Sets people off. They covered a lot of that in Boondocks. That whole mindset, that whole mentality. And Brian made a donation to the channel. He says, I'm his faith in humanity. Well, I don't know. I appreciate that, Brian, and thank you for the donation. Again, all the help I get, especially with all the shelter cats that we're taking care of. No, I often think about in the Bible when Jehovah, God, wanted to destroy all the people again, not just the Israelites, and told Moses, I'll just start over with you. And Moses is like, no, please don't do that. Give him a chance. I could just imagine if I was in that place, I'd be like, okay, but go ahead, burn everybody down. I guess I'm a lot more cynical than Moses was, despite the beard. Fluke Man says Africans hate each other, so do the Asians and Europeans. That's true. That is true, especially in Eastern Europe. Cross a border and see what happens. Africa, they can't stand each other, and they hate Black Americans when they come here. They don't like them. You see that all over the world, man. They do not get along. But we're supposed to pretend like that isn't true. And we're finally getting to a place where it's, that's really looking like it's fading away. And now the politicians have screwed it all up for everybody. It's really sickening. It's really sickening. And this is something else I wanted to take a look at real quick here before we sign off. Okay. While we were talking about children in schools and how they're brainwashed and manipulated, this falls into that category. And this is a local story. Okay. This is a local story from WSB TV News. It says thousands of students across Georgia walk out of school to speak out against gun violence, right? Cobb County, Georgia, thousands of Georgia students took part in a statewide school walkout Friday. The walkout comes on the heels of the Appalachia school shooting. Countless students who feel unsafe in school spoke out against gun violence. News Chopper 2 captures hundreds of students walking out of Wheeler High School. Channel 2 Cobb County Bureau Chief Michelle Newell was at Wheeler High School in Cobb County as students held signs and spoke out against violence. They taped pictures of victims who lost their lives in the Appalachia shooting on a fence near the bleachers of the football field. They also taped sticky notes on the same fence. Each note describes why students chose to walk out of school. Quote, we can continue saying never again with this track record. Or we cannot continue saying never again with this track record, said one student who spoke into a microphone, blah, blah, blah. This is not organic. This is what I have the issue with looking at this news story. There's nothing organic about this. What that is a bunch of students being manipulated by school officials. A bunch of kids didn't get together and decide to do a walkout, and you end up with thousands of schools or thousands of kids in multiple schools in one county walking out. They did not organize that. They did not just materialize signs and start writing sticky notes. Okay? Seriously. That was not organic. That was planned. That was organized. That was staged. That is another example of children being used to make political points. And of course, because they are children, they're too dumb to see through it. And you can't tell them that. Hey, kids, you're being manipulated. You're being used by political figures in the public, in and through the public school system. You don't tell me. You don't know me. Cruising says, every time I hear the term dog whistle, all I think of is toot sweets. There you go. Toot sweets, toot sweets. Gary Edwards says, what's more important to guard, bank money or students? Well, if you rob a bank, will you not get at least 10 years? They don't. Seriously. But with that, we are at the top of the hour, so I will go ahead and start signing off. Special thanks to Victoria, who made a donation directly to the PayPal link. Much appreciated. And thanks also to Brian, who made a donation to the channel. Always helpful, always appreciated. Again, you are listening to and or watching Coffee Talk, and you can find the live portion Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube at Coffee Talk Live and at Prepper University. Had Daniel with me the entire time. He's still asleep in the chair. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you, everybody who was able to join us here today. Hope you got something out of the conversation.